The Unseen Threat, a Human's Walk in Grimstone Alley. Well, hey there, space travelers, and welcome to Xylos Prime, a planet where even the shadows seem to have teeth. Tonight, we're venturing into the notorious Grimstone Alley, a place where trouble isn't just a possibility. No, it's practically the local greeting. The air here hangs heavy, thick, with the stench of recycled synthale, the metallic tang of uncleaned industrial waste, and the faint, unsettling hum of broken power conduits. Holographic ads flicker erratically on grime-caked walls, showing distorted glimpses of luxury and alien delights, only to quickly glitch back into static. Our tale begins with a trio of HFY Orcs, creatures that look like they were carved from mountains. Their scales are as tough as starship plating, and their claws could easily rip through reinforced steel. They're known across the sector for their brute strength and short tempers. Leading them, or at least trying to, was Crag. At 7 feet 4 inches, Crag was considered laughably short by HFY standards. To make up for this tiny stature, he was always spoiling for a fight, constantly trying to prove he was tougher than anyone else. His companions were Stone, the quiet and surprisingly wise one, and Grit, who usually let his massive size do the talking. Together, these three were a living, breathing wall of menace, enough to make most common thugs turn and run. Their heavy boots echoed through the narrow alleyways, a rhythmic thud that announced their presence. Crag, feeling restless, grumbled, "Ugh, this place is dead tonight. Not a single soul brave enough to even look at us sideways." He flexed his clawed hands, a habit that usually meant trouble was brewing in his mind. Stone, always the calm one, just shrugged his enormous shoulders. "That's good, Crag. Less paperwork. Less trouble for us." "Trouble is what I crave," Crag shot back, his multifaceted eyes scanning the shadows with a desperate intensity. "I mean, what's the point of being a HFY Orcs if you can't remind these lesser species where they stand?" Grit let out a chuckle, a sound like gravel grinding together. "Patience, Crag. The night is young, and Grimstone Alley always delivers." Just then, 4 Shalrain emerged from around a bend. Shalrain were known for their lightning speed and unblinking, unsettling eyes. They moved with a sleek, predatory grace, every muscle coiled and ready. The moment the two groups saw each other, the alley's air grew thick with tension. A silent staring contest began. The HFY Orcs stood their ground, aggressive and ready. The Shalrain held their posture, their gazes unwavering, assessing the odds. After a long, silent moment, both sides seemed to realize that starting a fight wasn't worth the risk. Slowly, almost reluctantly, the Shalrain veered off into a side passage, their movements still cautious. "Cowards!" Crag spat, a trail of green saliva hitting the grimy ground. "Ugh, they wouldn't even face us." "They were smart, Crag," Stone countered, his voice steady. 4 against 3, with their agility? Not worth the hassle. We might win, but we'd walk away with fresh scars. Crag was fuming, his fists clenched and unclenched. He desperately craved the thrill of dominance, the raw satisfaction of proving his superiority. He needed a fight. Then his multifaceted eyes caught sight of something new, something that made a wicked grin spread across his face. From the smoky haze of a synth vapor stall, a single being emerged, walking completely alone, and it was tiny, laughably tiny, even for Crag. It walked with an unsettling, casual confidence, its soft, unscaled skin completely unprotected by any armor. Its limbs seemed remarkably fragile. "Look," Crag hissed, his voice low and full of malicious glee. "That one. All alone, even shorter than me, and no armor. Let's get that one." Stone, always cautious, turned his gaze towards the lone figure. His expression remained unreadable, but his massive frame subtly shifted. As the being drew a little closer, Stone took one long, assessing look. Without a word, he moved, placing his enormous body directly in front of Crag, blocking his path. "No," Stone said, his voice deep and firm, a low rumble that instantly commanded attention. Crag's grin vanished, replaced by a furious scowl. "What? What do you mean? No! It's alone! It's an easy target! A soft one!" "No," Stone repeated, even firmer this time, his stance wide and unshakable. Crag let out an exasperated growl. "Seriously, are you blind, Stone? It's practically asking for trouble. We could teach it a lesson it won't forget." As they argued, The lone being stopped, about 20 feet away. It was illuminated by the flickering neon signs of a dilapidated noodle stand. It turned its head slowly, its bipedal form facing the three hulking Space Orcs. Its gaze wasn't aggressive or hostile. There was no fear in its posture, no trembling. Instead, its eyes, remarkably small but intensely focused, held a flicker of curiosity. And a hint of something else, something undefinable, that made a small shiver run down Grit's spine. It was as if they were nothing more than an interesting, albeit slightly loud, distraction. Crag, for all his bluster, even paused for a fraction of a second, unnerved by this utter lack of concern. Crag, quickly regaining his aggressive composure, decided to intimidate. He puffed out his chest. "Hey!" he bellowed, his voice echoing. "Hey, you! All alone and short! We're going to..." Before Crag could finish his arrogant threat, Stone's enormous hand clamped down on Crag's shoulder, his grip like a vice. Crag winced, despite his own bulk. Stone's voice cut through the air, calm but full of authority. "No, we aren't," Stone interrupted, his eyes fixed on the lone being, almost apologetically. Then, he raised his voice slightly, enough for the solitary figure to hear. "We're going to take our dim-witted friend off and explain some things to him. Enjoy your evening." The lone being remained still for another moment. Its gaze swept over the Space Orcs trio, then briefly settled on Stone. And then, something amazing happened. The corners of its lips, soft and unscaled, curled upwards just a fraction, in what could only be described as a tiny, almost imperceptible smirk. It was so quick, so subtle, that Crag missed it entirely, but Stone and Grit caught it. It was a silent acknowledgement, a tiny nod of understanding, and a clear sign that this being was far from intimidated. Then, with a slight, almost lazy nod of its head, it turned. Without another glance, without any hurry, it resumed its walk, disappearing into the labyrinthine shadows of Grimstone Alley as calmly as it had appeared. It was gone, leaving behind 3 Space Orcs and a heavy silence. Crag ripped his shoulder free from Stone's grip, his multifaceted eyes wide with disbelief and fury. He turned to Grit, expecting support, shared outrage. But Grit's expression was unreadable, perhaps even a little pensive. Crag saw no support there. "Why?" Crag demanded, his voice a furious snarl directed at Stone. "Why did you just let it walk away? It was perfect. It was alone. It was small. No armor. We could have easily taught it a lesson." He gestured wildly. Stone sighed, a sound like air escaping a large cavern. He rubbed his temples with a clawed hand, as if warding off a headache. Grit simply observed, his large eyes fixed on Stone, waiting. "Crag," Stone began, his voice calm, measured, almost weary. "There are 3 crucial things you need to understand. Things that will save your hide, and ours, in this galaxy. Pay attention. This isn't Space Orcs' brute force logic." Crag folded his arms, still fuming, but a flicker of grudging curiosity entered his eyes. "First," Stone stated, raising a thick, clawed finger, "you know, you must always, always, beware the one who walks alone in an area where everyone else moves in groups for protection." Crag scoffed. "But why? That just means it's weak, it's easy prey, it has no one to defend it." Stone's gaze was steady, unwavering. "No, Crag, you misunderstand. It means the exact opposite. Because that's the one who doesn't need protection. Even from a group. Even from a group like us." Crag's jaw dropped. "What? Doesn't need protection from us? No way. We're Space Orcs. We're the predators." Stone remained unfazed. "It means that one has no need to fear a group. Not just your group, Crag. Not just the 3 of us. It has no need to fear any group. Because it is capable of handling any threat. Alone. Imagine, Crag, a single being so confident in its own abilities that it walks through a den of wolves like it's a stroll in the park. That's not weakness, that's absolute terrifying power." Crag shook his head, a mixture of confusion and disbelief. That's ridiculous. It was so small, so soft. A single Case Orcs could crush it, let alone 3 of us. Which brings me to the second thing, Stone continued, his voice dropping slightly, becoming more serious. That being we just let walk away, the one you dismissed as small and unimpressive? He paused for dramatic effect, allowing the words to sink in. That was a human. Crag's eyes widened, his multifaceted gaze blinking rapidly. A human? That was a human? But it had no armor. It was short. It was completely unimpressive. I've seen galactic news feeds, Stone. Humans are always depicted as frail, easily subdued. They're barely taller than half our height. They're like glorified squishworms. Stone nodded slowly. Precisely, Crag. And that's their greatest deception. Their lack of imposing physical presence often leads others to underestimate them. It's like judging a venomous viper by its size. They don't rely on scales or claws or immense bulk. They rely on other things. Things Case Orcs don't usually comprehend. What other things? Crag demanded, a strange knot forming in his stomach. The smug confidence he had felt moments ago was rapidly eroding, replaced by a growing sense of unease. Stone looked at Grit, who finally spoke, his deep voice resonating in the alley. Their intelligence, Crag. Their sheer adaptability. Their cunning. And their tenacity. We Case Orcs fight with strength. Humans fight with will. And their will is often stronger than any bone. Grit paused. But there's something else, too. Something more immediate that Stone recognized. Stone nodded in agreement. Which leads to the third and final thing, Crag, Stone said, his gaze locking with Crag's, an intensity in his multifaceted eyes that Crag rarely saw. That particular human, the one you wanted to get? Stone's voice was a low, chilling whisper now. That particular human is former military. The words hung in the air, heavier than the spaceport's polluted atmosphere. Crag opened his mouth, ready to retort, to argue, to deny the unsettling truth of Stone's words. But no words came. His mind raced, replaying the human's calm demeanor, its utterly fearless gaze, its casual stroll into the heart of a dangerous zone. He remembered the unblinking curiosity, the hint of that strange smirk, the lack of even a twitch of fear when faced with 3 hulking Case Orcs. And now, the revelation, former military. The phrase resonated with a deep, primal understanding that even Crag, in his limited wisdom, could grasp. Former military, in most species, meant trained killers, individuals hardened by conflict, masters of strategy and survival. But for humans, the stories were different. The whispers across the galaxy spoke of their terrifying ingenuity in warfare, their relentless drive, their capacity for violence far exceeding their physical limitations, and their absolute refusal to stay down. They fought with a ferocity that defied logic and a cunning that bordered on madness. Remember the HFY incident? Stone continued, seeing the realization dawn in Crag's eyes. Where a single human scout unit, outnumbered 10-1 by Gricon heavy infantry, held a pass for 3 cycles? Not with brute force, Crag. With traps, with trickery, with a stubbornness that broke the Gricon's will. Or the whisper killer of the Nebula Wars. A human, barely 5 feet tall, who took out an entire commando squad in a zero-G environment, using nothing but a broken comlink and a loose power cable. They call it improvisation. We call it madness. A cold dread began to spread through Crag's massive frame, replacing his earlier frustration. He imagined the small, seemingly fragile being, suddenly moving with unnatural speed, striking with impossible force, exploiting every weakness. He pictured himself, a 7'4" Case Orcs, lying broken in the alley, defeated by something less than half his size. The thought was humiliating, terrifying. Grit stepped forward then, placing a heavy hand on Crag's shoulder, a gesture of grim understanding. So, Grit said, his voice quiet but firm. Yeah, that's why you beware the one who walks alone, where everyone else goes in groups for protection. They're not afraid of you, Crag. They're not afraid of your group. They're not afraid of any group. Grit continued, his words sinking deep into Crag's mind. They don't need to be afraid. They don't need protection because they are the protection. They are the threat. They are the predator in disguise. And when a creature like that decides to walk alone, it's not because it's weak. It's because it's hunting, or because it's so supremely confident in its abilities that it sees no threat in its surroundings. They look like easy prey, Crag, but they're the ones who'll turn you into prey before you even know what's happening. Stone added, his voice low. That human, Crag, likely saw us not as a threat, but as an inconvenience. A minor obstacle in its path. Imagine, a being small enough to fit in the palm of your hand, yet capable of making 3 Caxarchs rethink their entire existence. Crag swallowed hard, the metallic taste of fear now palpable in his mouth. He looked back down the alley, towards the emptiness where the human had disappeared. The silence of the night suddenly felt heavier, more ominous. The familiar sounds of the spaceport, distant alarms, the hum of grab vehicles, the drunken shouts from a nearby cantina seemed to fade into the background, replaced by the ringing echo of Stone's words. A human, Crag murmured, the word tasting alien and dangerous on his tongue. And former military. Indeed, Stone confirmed. They are called veterans in their own tongue. And a human veteran, especially one willing to walk these streets alone, is not someone you want to provoke. They are quiet until they need to be loud. They are still until they need to be fast. And they are harmless until you give them a reason not to be. And then, Crag, they become a storm of pure, unadulterated chaos. Grit nodded. It's not about how big they are, Crag. It's about what they've seen, what they've done, and what they are capable of. They carry their armor inside them, in their minds, in their training, in their sheer, unyielding will. It's invisible, but it's far stronger than any plating you or I could ever wear. Crag slowly ran a clawed hand over his own scaled chest, feeling the thick, durable plates that had always made him feel invulnerable. Now, they felt almost flimsy in comparison to the, quote, invisible armor Grit had described. His aggressive posturing, his desire for an easy fight, suddenly seemed foolish, almost suicidal. He had been a hair's breadth away from inviting a catastrophe upon himself and his companions. So, Crag finally managed, his voice quieter than usual, a hint of awe or perhaps fear in his tone. We just leave them alone? You leave them alone, Stone confirmed, his voice firm. You give them a wide berth. You show them the respect their capabilities demand, not the disdain their appearance might suggest. Because if you don't, Crag, you won't just get a few new scars. You'll get a lesson. A painful one. And it might be the last lesson you ever learn. The 3 Caxarchs stood in silence for a long moment, the lessons of the night settling over them. The aggressive swagger had left Crag's stride. He still craved a fight, but now, his hunger was tempered by a new, chilling respect. He looked at Stone and Grit, seeing not just companions, but mentors who had saved him from an unthinkable fate. As they began to walk again, heading deeper into the spaceport, Crag found himself scanning the shadows, not for an easy target, but for signs of that quiet, unassuming threat. The lone walker. The human. And for the first time in his life, Crag felt a tremor of something akin to genuine fear. A fear born not of brute strength, but of unseen, terrifying potential. A potential encapsulated in a species that chose to walk alone, not out of weakness, but because they simply didn't need anyone else. And that, he realized, was the most dangerous kind of power in the galaxy. The night continued, but for Crag, the Grimstone Alley had changed. It was no longer just a hunting ground. It was a classroom. And the lesson learned tonight, from a being barely half his size, was one he would never, ever forget. Always beware the one who walks alone. Because they are the ones who are truly to be feared. The night air, once just a backdrop to his aggression, now felt thick with unseen tales of quiet, formidable power. The proof in the alley. Just as Crag was absorbing this profound, unsettling truth, a sudden commotion erupted from a side alley, the same one the human had just entered. A loud, guttural roar ripped through the night, followed by the clatter of falling metal and a series of high-pitched yelps. The sounds were unmistakably those of a street brawl, but something about them felt different. More intense, more one-sided. The Caxarchs trio froze. Crag's multifaceted eyes snapped towards the source of the noise. "Whoa, what was that?" he whispered, a new kind of caution in his voice. Stone's head tilted slightly, listening. "It sounds like trouble. Fast trouble." Grit, ever practical, pointed with a massive claw. And it sounds like it came from right where that human went. Curiosity, mixed with a healthy dose of fear, compelled them. They cautiously approached the mouth of the alley. The sounds of struggle were dying down, replaced by groans and the heavy thud of bodies. As they peered around the grimy corner, their mandibles dropped. The narrow alley was a mess. 3 large, brutish Borlax thugs, known for their thick hides and vicious tempers, lay sprawled amidst overturned refuse bins and scattered debris. One was slumped against a wall, visibly unconscious, his head at an awkward angle. Another was whimpering, clutching a mangled arm. The third was trying to get up, swaying unsteadily, a deep cut bleeding above his eye, and standing over them, seemingly untouched, was the human. It hadn't even broken a sweat. Its breathing was even, its posture relaxed. It was casually wiping something small and metallic on a clean patch of its trousers. As it finished, it looked down at the whimpering Borlax. A faint, almost pitying look on its face. Then, it nudged a discarded piece of trash with its foot, and with a surprisingly swift and precise movement, picked up a small, shiny object from the ground. It was a HFY Orcs standard utility knife, not much bigger than a human's hand, but its blade was razor-sharp. It had clearly been dropped by one of the Borlax. The human examined the knife for a moment, turning it over in its hand. Then, with a playful glint in its eye, a glint that only the HFY Orcs could see, it casually flicked the knife upwards. It spun gracefully in the air, glinting under the dim alley lights. The human's hand shot up and caught the knife by the blade, not the handle. It didn't flinch, didn't bleed. Then, with an effortless motion, it flipped the knife around in its palm, catching it perfectly by the handle in one smooth, fluid movement. It repeated the flick and catch, this time tossing it behind its back, catching it perfectly again without looking. It did this several times, a display of effortless dexterity that bordered on contemptuous. This wasn't just skill, it was a performance. A silent, terrifying demonstration of controlled precision, and an absolute lack of self-preservation that shocked the HFY Orcs to their core. A HFY Orcs would never, could never, play with a sharp blade like that. The human then looked up, its eyes meeting Stone's for a brief, acknowledging moment. This time, there was no smirk. Just a calm, almost bored expression. It gave a slight nod towards the beaten Borlax, as if to say, "Hey, see? Told you." Then, with a final, almost lazy flick of the knife into a nearby open drain, it turned and resumed its casual stroll down the alley, disappearing once more into the night. It was gone, leaving behind only the groans of the Borlax and the stunned HFY Orcs. Crag's jaw was practically scraping the ground. His scales felt like ice. The stories, Stone's warnings, the whispers of human capabilities, it all crashed down on him with the force of a supernova. He had seen it with his own eyes. The unimpressive, short human had just effortlessly disarmed and incapacitated 3 seasoned thugs, and then played with a razor-sharp blade as if it were a toy, proving every terrifying legend true. It played with that knife, Crag stammered, his voice barely a whisper. Like, by the blade, and it wasn't even looking. Stone clapped Crag hard on the shoulder, a booming sound that made him jump. "Now do you understand, Crag? Now do you believe me? That was a human veteran. They don't need armor because they are the weapon. They don't need a group because they are a one-person army." Grit let out a long, slow breath. They could have been walking to get a synth noodle soup, Crag, and those Borlax just happened to be in the way. For a human veteran, that's not a fight. That's a mild inconvenience. Like walking through a puddle. Crag looked from the beaten Borlax to his own large, powerful hands. His aggressive swagger was utterly gone, replaced by a deep, profound respect that bordered on terror. He had wanted a fight, he had been itching for trouble, and he had almost found it, in the most unexpected and terrifying form imaginable. "So," Crag said, his voice now laced with genuine awe, "we really just leave them alone." "You leave them alone, Crag," Stone repeated, his voice firm and final. "You give them a wide berth, and if you ever see one, walking alone in a place like this, you don't even think about looking at them sideways. Because that's not an easy target. That's the storm. And you, my dim-witted friend, just dodged a lightning strike." The three Kasarks stood in the alley, the silence broken only by the whimpers of the Borlax. For Craig, Grimstone Alley had revealed a profound truth. The galaxy wasn't just about size and raw power. It was about adaptability, cunning, and an unyielding will that could turn the smallest, most unassuming being into the most dangerous force imaginable. He would never look at a short being the same way again. And he would definitely, absolutely, always beware the one who walks alone. Because sometimes, the real monster isn't the one that looks like a mountain. It's the one that just walks away and leaves a pile of broken thugs behind. The night continued, but for Crag, it had been a night of revelation. A night where a small, unimpressive human had shown him the true meaning of fear and the terrifying, beautiful power of humanity.